So tell me, what do you do for a living?
I talk to people.
And what do you talk to them about?
Oh, all kinds of things. Of course, I have my favorites, like, hey, they can see your muffin top through that shirt. People don't really like your jokes. You know, your friends screen your calls, right? Stuff like that, fun stuff.
Wait, explain. Exactly what do you do?
Well, I'm a chatterbox. I live in your head. I'm that guy who's always reminding you of all the things that you're terrible at, like picking out clothes, for example. Was the power out at your house this morning? Did you get dressed in the dark?
You always like this?
Oh, no. Usually I'm much better. I'm only clipping along at about 20% right now because I guarantee you could not handle the full 100.
100?
Let me tell you a little something. Some people say, most people say, if you can't beat them, join them. I say if you can't beat them, beat them. Because they'll be expecting you to join them. That way you'll have the element of surprise.
I'm remembering why we don't get along.
You know what's funny? People will believe anything I say as long as I whisper it. Like, hey, no, everybody's wearing jeans that fit like that. You know, it'll be fine. Yeah, that whole exploding can of biscuits thing is really in right now. Go for it. Hashtag wide load. Just kidding, not kidding.
Hey, this is a great week to be at Journey Church. We're starting a brand new series called Crash the Chatterbox, and I'm just excited about it. Man, one thing I want to mention to you as we're getting rolling this morning, as you saw Sean on the Charla, sorry, you saw Charla on the video. This is getting really long, and really kind of like just. Do you hear this? Like I hear this voice, chattering at me, telling me you don't have what it takes, just kind of whispering all the time. You saw the shirt she was wearing, though. You can pick those up in the lobby, and we love those shirts because we don't make anything on them, so I don't feel like I'm like selling you something. We just love for you to have those. They're available in the lobby. But you know what happens whenever you make a mistake, you misspeak, you do something, and there's this voice that just kind of just says, come on, you don't have this is ridiculous. You're being stupid. Why do you do things like that? I get it all the time. We all hear voices, and I know if you're here for the first time, you're going, oh man, I knew it. I knew these Christian people. They're freaks. They all talk about hearing voices in their head. They think God talks to them, and it's going to be. You're thinking this is where we start getting the snakes out, and we start doing crazy stuff. No, we're not getting any snakes out. I hate snakes. But here's the deal. We all have this voice in our head that just kind of whispers at us, chatters at us, and constantly bites at us and tells us things that aren't true, but constantly tries to keep us from hearing the voice of God in our life. I want you to know something, that the church lady back on Saturday Night Live, she had it straight. She knew exactly, could it be Satan? Come on. That was funnier than you're giving me credit. The 9:30 service laughs at stuff. What's up with you people? You guys had an extra hour and a half of sleep. Come on. But the thing is that we hear this voice all the time, kind of just chattering away at our lives, and we don't always engage it and beat it down. We're going to talk about that over the next few weeks because listening to words is vital. Words matter. Words matter. Isaiah chapter 55, this is some pretty great stuff. God is talking to us through the prophet Isaiah, and he says these words. He says, listen to me. Man, I want you to get something. If you only took 3 words away from this week, for that matter, if you only took 3 words away from this whole series, just take those 3 words. God saying to you, listen to me. Those 3 words matter more than you could possibly imagine. But they're also more difficult to apply, more difficult to really grab a hold of than you could possibly imagine. God wants you and me to listen to him. And he says this, listen to me and you'll eat what is good. Now we're speaking my kind of language, right? I mean, God knew that Christians would read this, right? Some of us grew up in Baptist churches. We know how to eat, right? So we get together, whether 2 or more are gathered, somebody's bringing a casserole. So we get this idea, I like to eat, but that's not what he's talking about, because in the couple previous verses to this, God says, trust me, right? I'll give you what's good to eat, and don't worry about what it costs. It's free. I'm giving it away. What God is really saying here isn't just that we can have what's good to eat. What he's saying here is that I will provide for everything you need if you just listen to me. But listening is not very easy, and it's so important for us because look what he says. It will give you good. You'll enjoy the finest food. Come to me with ears wide open. Listen, huge important, and you will find life. Isn't that what we're looking for? I mean, we're looking for life. I don't know about you, but that's what I'm looking for. It's what I'm looking for in everything that I try to accomplish. It's what I'm looking for when I succeed, and I'm looking around me to see if someone will tell me that I'm good at what I'm doing. It's what I'm looking for in my hobbies. It's what I'm looking for in all of my life. Isn't that what we're looking for, what you're looking for? Isn't that what you're looking for when you first started experimenting with that thing that you're addicted to now? Isn't it what you were looking for when you first, took on that new idea in your life, when you went out on your own in business? Isn't that what you were looking for? Isn't it what you were looking for in every piece of it? We're always looking for the things that give us life, things that matter, things that give us hope and purpose and meaning and value. We want life, and I want us to know, this is important, that God wants us to have that. God wants us to have life. In fact, it's what Jesus said about his whole mission for coming. The whole reason that he came to be a part of this whole thing we call planet Earth in the first place is he said, I have come, in John 10:10, that you might have life and have it to the full, life abundant. You wonder why you don't have that life? You wonder why everything you try, everything we pour our life into, it doesn't seem to give us any kind of purpose and meaning and value? We scratch around trying to find just the smallest glimpse of anything that resembles life. We try it in our hobbies, and we're scratching around trying to find it in a little bit of fun on a Saturday. I try to find it in our vacations. You know how it is? I mean, we go to a vacation for a week or 2 weeks to live a life that we can't afford to live the other 50 weeks of the year because we want to find life, something that's meaningful and valuable and an experience that's just exciting. It's what we look for in relationships with people. We want something that gives us life. I enjoy a lot of things. I enjoy time at home with my family. I enjoy a lot of stuff, and I always look for it because it brings those little glimpses of life, of real life. I enjoy sitting on my front porch, and this might surprise you. I love sitting on my front porch by myself in total silence. I know that's a little weird, but I enjoy just sitting out on my front porch, total silence, with a cigar and looking at this one particular tree in my yard. Now, it's a little weird, right? Because when I first moved in, this tree, have you ever seen the shape of a tree? It kind of has just a kind of regular shape. Well, it has this like 6 branches that stuck out of one side. Now, those of you who I've gotten to know that kind of crap like drives me up a wall. Like I'm just dying, right? I mean, when there's a tablecloth that's not straight, I'm straightening it. If there's a picture that's crooked, I'm fixing it. If the chairs aren't exactly straight, I will tell you to get up while I fix the chairs, okay? That's how it is. I just get a little bit freaked out about that kind of stuff. So to sit out there and I'm like, oh, I'm so gonna enjoy this, right? Perfect weather, perfect environment, I got a good cigar. I'm looking at this tree and it's just scratching at my brain, because there's one part that's not like the rest of the tree. And everything in me wanted to get the little chainsaw, like I got this like homeowner, like reaching chainsaw thing, like that you'd think, I feel like it's a chainsaw, but it's like this big, it was like when I used to drive a Prius, so it's sort of like a car. So, but I wanted to get up there and cut those branches off because I wanted it to be symmetrical and perfect. And after a little while, I just was sitting there and I just felt like God was saying, hey, Jeremy, just be patient. Be patient with that shape. Be patient with those few branches because that's not something that's out of line. That's something that I'm doing, something that I'm growing the new shape of a new shape for the tree, and that's the beginning of it. And it looks a little out of order right now, but just be patient with it. Man, that moment brought life to me. It mattered. I all of a sudden just felt like, man, I've got to be willing to let God shape some new thoughts in my life, some new parts of my life, because what it did was brought life into my walk with God, and that matters. It's what I'm looking for all the time. I want life that matters. The problem is our pursuit of life is not as simple as a document that promises us that we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? It's not as simple as just saying, I have the right to find life. It's not just about just jumping through the hoops and just finding it, because everything that you and I do is opposed, particularly our pursuit for life. We have an enemy who doesn't want us to find life. Now, there's a part of us that goes, man, I know when I can tell the enemy's at work, right? Because we can look backwards in our life, and we can see the enemy at work. We're like, oh, I saw him. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was at work in that relationship, and man, he took me way off base. Or man, I didn't realize it, but the enemy was at work in this thing that was going on, and I didn't realize it then, but I do now. Or no, you look at the TV and you watch the news unfold on the average weekday, right? And we see the enemy at work in people's lives all over the place. The problem is we don't recognize him at work in our life. We recognize him when he's already done the damage, partially because we don't really understand how to look for him or where or what he looks like. Check this out.
Delmer. Keep your fingers away from Pete's mouth. He ain't had nothing to eat for 13 years except prison food, gopher, and a little greasy horse.
Thanks for the lift, sir. My name's Tommy Johnson.
How you doing, Tommy? Say, I haven't seen a house out here for miles. What are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I had to be at that there crossroads last midnight. Sell my soul to the devil.
Well, ain't it a small world, spiritually speaking? Pete and Delmer just been baptized and saved. I guess I'm the only one that remains unaffiliated.
This ain't no laughing matter, Everett.
What'd the devil give you for your soul, Tommy?
Well, he taught me to play this here guitar real good.
Oh, son, for that you traded your everlasting soul?
Well, I wouldn't use it.
I've always wondered, what's the devil look like?
Well, of course, there are all manner of lesser imps and demons, Pete, but the great Satan himself is red and scaly with a bifurcated tail, and he carries a hay fork.
Oh, no, sir. He's white. As white as you folks. With empty eyes and a big hollow voice. He loved to travel around with a mean old hound. That's right.
And he told you to go to Tishomingo?
Well, no, sir. Well, that was my idea. I heard there's a man down there. He pays folks money singing to his can. They say he pays an extra if you play real good.
Tishomingo, huh? How much he pay?
I almost forgot to come back up here. I was watching the movie. The great Satan himself, looks like, he's got red and scaly with a bifurcated tail, and he carries a hay fork. That's the kind of picture that we have. Now, we logically are probably more theologically know that that's not really the case, that he doesn't look like that, or he doesn't kind of act in those kind of normal, kind of predisposed ways. But I want us to understand something. We can find him very easily because he tells us what he's up to. Jesus said that the first part of that verse that we read a little bit ago, when it said that Jesus came to give us life and give it abundantly, John 10:10, the first part of that verse says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus told us exactly what he was going to be doing. If there is thieving going on, if there's stealing, killing, or destroying going on, then you got to know something. That's the enemy's work. You're looking at his handiwork. If your joy is being stolen, if your excitement, your passion for life, if something about you just feels like it's withering up and dying, then you need to understand something. That's the work of the enemy. And what's vital that we get at is that he is the chatterbox. He's the one that's whittling away at us, telling us that is what we do, and we don't look good this way, or we don't act that way, or we don't understand something, or people don't like our jokes, or he's that one who's constantly giving us those words of fear and those words of condemnation, those accusations of insecurity, those parts of us that keep kind of welling up and getting nibbled away, those parts of us that feel like we're withering and dying. When you look in the mirror and there's a part of you that is unhappy and feels condemned by what you see, understand something. That's the voice of the enemy, whispering at you, doing everything he can to steal and kill and destroy. There are two voices, God's voice and the voice of the chatterbox, the voice of the enemy. The thing that we have to understand, the bottom line really is this: the voice that you choose to listen to will determine the future that you experience. The voice that you choose to listen to will determine the future that you experience. Look in your rearview mirror. I mean, look at your life up to this point. Isn't it true that the voice that you listened to in the past has determined the life that you're living now? Isn't it true that the voice that you listened to growing up, the voice you listened to as a teenager, the voice that you've listened to when it came to relationships with people, isn't it true that the voice that you chose to listen to, didn't it determine the future that you're experiencing now? It will continue to be the case that you will experience the future of the voice that you're listening to. And the enemy is hard at work in your thoughts. It's something that we don't quite always engage with. But the truth is that the enemy is constantly whittling away at our thoughts and our feelings in the background of our minds. I told you that this series is based off of a book called Crash the Chatterbox by Stephen Furtick. And if you haven't read it, you should read it because it's just a great book. Now, we're not going to tear apart everything in the book because we want you to be able to read that book and enjoy it and still have a lot to learn. So I'm trying to build this series kind of out around it so that you have some kind of template for it. But one of the words that I love and took right out of the book is this word. It's called Logorrhea. Now, the word etymology tells us kind of where a word comes from and how it built up and what's going on in our life. But this word Logorrhea, the first half of it is basically, its root is the Greek word logos, which is the word. So where we get the word Bible, like logos, is the word. But Logorrhea, the first part is logos, and the second part, well, you might be able to recognize that one, right? You heard of maybe diarrhea? So there's... 3 of you are listening. So there's the Chatterbox, she's rapping. But Logorrhea is just kind of, you ever met anybody who's like this? Some of you are like, I'm looking at you right now, this very minute. Diarrhea of the mouth, right? The person who just cannot contain this kind of pathologically incoherent, repetitive, over and over, just saying whatever comes into their mind, comes out of their mouth. They have no control over it. That is exactly the story of the Chatterbox. That constantly incoherent, pathologically incoherent, just repetitive speech saying over and over again whatever it takes to tear us down and leave us wanting for life, because that's what God designed us for. The voice of the Chatterbox is constantly just whittling away at our lives. But there's a tendency in our lives to think that there are really only 2 voices. Have you ever been in that situation? You're going, well, there's God's voice, and then there's the voice of the enemy. I can understand that now, but doesn't it feel like there's a third voice? Like it's our voice? And you're thinking, well, that's not really the enemy telling me that I am ugly. That's not really the enemy telling me this or that. That's my self-esteem. Isn't that the way we think of it? Like it's the way we esteem or value ourselves. I think that the whole self-esteem movement has really become something that the enemy has done to disguise himself. He puts himself behind thinking, well, if you think that way about you, you'll blame you. It's like what he said in the video. They'll believe anything I say as long as I say it at a whisper. Because that's how it is, isn't it? I mean, if he told us who he was, we would fight immediately, isn't it? I mean, if he woke us up one morning and shook us at the base of the bed and said, hey, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like you to throw away your entire life over this insecurity issue. I'd love for you to pursue life with this relationship that you're not married to. I'd love for you to do this. And you know what we would do? If we saw the enemy standing at the end of our bed, we would go, you're crazy. No, but because he hides behind our voice, behind our flesh, that's what the problem really is he hides behind it, and he says it so quietly that we think it's us saying it. So quietly that you blame yourself for feeling the way he says that you feel. It's really about our flesh, and that's really the tension, isn't it? That we think there's God's voice and the enemy's voice and the flesh voice. But I love the way Tony Evans defines the flesh. This is such a powerful definition. The flesh is a storehouse of sinful memories of the sins I've committed, those committed against me, and those that I've witnessed, our bodies and brains are conditioned by these memories. Isn't that the case? That the things that you've done, the things that have been done to you, the things that you've witnessed over your life, don't you find that those things that you've experienced, don't they condition the way that you think, both positively and negatively? Like if you've significantly sinned in your life, doesn't that kind of, the memory of that haunt you all the time? Or if someone wronged you and hurt you in a deep and sincere and broken way, and you're deeply scarred from it, doesn't that condition the way you think or the things that you've experienced in this life? Don't they tend to flavor the way you approach things in your life, relationships and interactions with other people, and the way even that you look at God's word? Doesn't that always impact you negatively? But the same thing's true when you've seen God work in your life. When you look in the rearview mirror of your life and you see, man, God has been at work in this unbelievable way, provided for us. Doesn't that shape the way you see things in the future? When you are when you're able to approach God and really have a conversation with him, doesn't it change the way you think and feel and act about those things? When someone's kind to you, doesn't it change the way you think? You see, here's the thing. I think that our flesh is made up of the bad things and the good things that have happened to us. And it's just a constant memory of those other two voices. So at the end of the day, there's really just two voices in this whole economy. There's really just the enemy's voice and God's voice, the chatterbox and the Holy Spirit speaking to us. And the enemy is constantly whittling away at those things in our life, but he whispers quietly because he wants to disguise the source. It's like we said earlier, if he woke us up one morning and told us who he was and then said, hey, I'd like to wreck your life doing this, or I'd like to tell you don't look good in that, or I'd tell you're not a funny person, or people don't like you, or you feel discouraged. I mean, I was thinking, I wrote down a bunch of things here where the chatterbox just whittles away at my life. You sound stupid when you whatever. He says to me that you will never recover from that reputation, that story, that sin. He says to me that you'll always struggle with that problem. He tells me that you're not like the other guys. And I don't know why I wrote this one down, but I wrote down that he says you're not as pretty as she is. But I'm pretty sure I didn't mean that for me. I think that I meant that for someone else, but because unless it's Thursday, I guess. But you're on your own. Nobody cares. And the enemy constantly tells me that I don't have what it takes, and that I don't have what it takes, and that I can't do it. I'm all on my own, and I've got to provide for myself. The truth of it is that the enemy is constantly whittling away at me, and my guess is he's doing the same thing in your life, telling you that you don't have what it takes, telling you that it's your fault this is struggling, telling you that it's all about you. And he's stealing and killing and destroying the very life that Jesus came to give you. So here's the tension, right? If the enemy whispers to disguise himself as a source, where's our hope? I mean, where's our hope for doing this, for dealing with this whispering enemy chattering away in our ears? Our hope is that God gives us everything we need to combat those things. Over the next 4 weeks after today, we're going to deal with 4 of the very specific things that we walk away and be able to walk out of the room and specifically understand exactly what it is that we can do to combat the voice of the chatterbox in our life, particularly as it relates to 4 different topics. Now, these aren't an exhaustive list, but we're going to nail down 4 areas of our life where we can specifically fight the chatterbox. The voice of insecurity, where he constantly says that you don't have what it takes, that you're not enough, that you're not good enough, you're not strong enough. The voice of fear that tells you that you can't because of this or that. The voice that tells you that you're not enough to be able to carry that across the tracks, or this isn't going to work because of this, or that part of you that goes, man, I don't know if I could do that because I'm terrified. Fighting the voice of insecurity, fighting the voice of fear, fighting the voice of condemnation that tells you that you're never going to be more than your reputation, that you're never going to measure up, that condemning accusation, fighting that insinuating voice of discouragement, where you feel like you're just not going to measure up to someone's expectations. Every one of us hear them. Over the next few weeks, the next 4 weeks specifically, we're going to walk through how specifically to combat the voice of fear and discouragement, that voice of insecurity that just keeps rattling away at us, the voice that whispers so quietly that we think that it's us talking. You see, the problem is, how are we supposed to combat that if all we hear is the whispers that we think are ourselves, and I can't hear God's voice? You ever wondered that? I mean, like, where's God in the middle of this mess? Where's God in this voice? I'm hearing this constant voice of condemnation and insecurity and fear and anxiety, and I hear this constant weight just repetitively going off in my head, but I'm wanting to hear God's voice so badly, so we beg for it, right? And we hear stories about people who heard from God, and we want to have this like epic voice, don't we? In the middle of our fear. There's a prophet in the Old Testament, his name's Elijah, and he has this interaction with God. Now, you might be familiar with Elijah's story, and if you are, man, this is a cool story. We're going to talk about it when we talk about fear in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk more about this passage. But he goes through a spell in his life where no matter what he's seen God do, and he's seen God do some unbelievable things. Like, he got this huge altar, and he calls down fire from heaven and sets on this altar in front of all these other people, and winds up just like totally defeating the enemy. It's a powerful story of God's provision. He was still riddled in fear and wanted desperately to hear from God. And he's hearing the voice of the chatterbox telling him that he doesn't have what it takes and that he should be afraid and that he's gonna die and that God hates him and that God's abandoned him. And he winds up in this cave and God comes to speak to him. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 19. It says this in verse 11. He says, "Go out and stand before me on the mountain," the Lord told him. And as he stood there, this is important, the Lord passed him by as a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks tore loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. And then after that, the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face with a cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. So important that we get this. The enemy whispers because he wants to disguise his voice. The Father whispers because he's close by. The Father whispers because he's close by. He's nearby us. He doesn't always come in this gigantic, epic way. Sometimes he speaks quietly because he's nearby us and he doesn't want to startle us into action. He doesn't want to guilt us into action. He just simply wants to walk with us into action. Over the next few weeks, God's going to use his whisper and my loud voice to share with you ways that you can fight the insecurity, the fear, that desperation, those difficult things in our lives where we constantly hear the chatterbox just whittling away at who we are. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the enemy telling me that I don't have what it takes. I'm tired of him telling me that God has abandoned me. I'm tired of just that constant, just dull, constant nagging of the enemy. I'm at a point in my life where I'm just finished listening to it. And here's my hope for you, that you'll be finished. I love the words of this song that we're going to sing in a minute. It says, "Are you hurting and broken within, overwhelmed by the weight of your sin? Jesus is calling." Is that where you're at today? I mean, where you're going, man, I am. I'm just overwhelmed by it all. I just am tired. Are you at the place where you're hurting and broken, and he's just been at it for years and years and years, attacking and hitting and punching and digging away again and again and again? He's stealing and killing and destroying, and you're just worn out. Are you hurting and broken within, desperate for God to fix it? Are you at a place in your life, I love this phrase, have you come to the end of yourself? Do you thirst for a drink from the well? Have you come to the end of yourself? Can I just encourage you with this? That it doesn't matter what I preach over the next 4 weeks. I could share with you unbelievable truth, and the truth is that if you haven't come to the end of yourself, that you'll continue to do what you're doing. Because the truth is that we'll all continue to do what we're doing until what we're doing doesn't work for us anymore. And when it stops working and we get to the point where we're like, I'm done listening to that voice, I'm done working at having this thing work against me, and once we've identified it and we begin to fight against it and we get done with it, then it'll begin to work in my life. But it won't work in our life until what I am doing doesn't work anymore. Is that where you're at? Have you come to the end of yourself? Well, Jesus is calling. In a minute, we're going to sing this song. When we're done, the ushers are going to bring a tray to you. And it is such a powerful symbolism. It's such a powerful picture. Because in the middle of it is a little tiny piece of bread and a little cup of juice on the outside. And they mean literally almost nothing apart from this moment in time. Because it's that little piece of bread and that little cup of juice that mean nothing out there but mean everything in here, because it's that little symbol that reminds us that the Father's whispering into our ear, I love you so much that I gave my Son for you. It's that little cup of juice that reminds us that we're loved so deeply that the Son shed his blood to cover our sin. And there's a part of us that has to just resound with the hope, resound with the life that God offers us, the powerful, abundant life that we're offered here. So when that tray comes to you, if you're a follower of Jesus, or if you want to be, if you want to begin a relationship with Jesus today, this is a great way to do it, to accept that truth of God's love for you. Just take a little piece of bread and a little cup of juice and you tell Jesus about it. If that's your story, I'd invite you to be a part of it. But let me talk to you about this. If you're here today and this isn't, you feel like you're just not into this whole Jesus thing yet, this isn't like your story, I want you to know something about the group of people that you're here with today. This is not a group of people who used to be people like you. We're not a group of people who tolerate people like you. We're not a group of people who try to fix or repair people like you. We're just a group of broken people just like you. And there's nobody in this room who wants you to pretend to be something you're not. When that tray comes to you, if that's not your story, then just hand it to the person next to you. Just take a couple of minutes and ask yourself, how much longer are you going to put up with that voice whittling away at you before you lay it down and just come to the end of yourself? Let's stand up and sing.